I'm in love with the teacher everyone hates. Wait, is that? If someone had said that a 3-month-old was cartwheeling right behind me, I would have still believed him. But what I saw was not possible, not only in this universe, but in any. It was like any other Friday night. I was a little tipsy at the new gay bar, hoping to find a new kind of buzz, but what I found instead shocked me to my core. There on a table in the middle of the bar was none other than Lucas Smith, my strict maths teacher, shirtless. He was dancing like nobody was watching, and let me tell you, I had never seen anything like it. My mouth fell open as I stood frozen, half a drink in hand, trying to process the scene unfolding before me. "Is that?" I muttered, my voice barely audible over the thumping bass of the music. It was definitely him, Lucas, with his honey ash blonde hair tousled and those striking blue eyes sparkling under the disco lights. He was having the time of his life, swaying his hips and laughing with a group of strangers, completely unrecognizable from the stern figure I was so used to. There was something exhilarating about him in that moment, so carefree, so happy. I couldn't help but feel a strange pull to join him. Before I knew it, the alcohol took over my inhibitions and I found myself moving toward the table. The crowd parted like the Red Sea, and I climbed up beside him, my heart pounding in my chest. The music pumped louder, and I decided to let loose, shaking my hips and raising my arms in the air. To my surprise, Lucas noticed me and grinned, a look of pure joy on his face. "Jayden, come join the party," he yelled over the music, his voice full of laughter. I couldn't help but smile back. There was something about seeing him like this that made my heart flutter. Here was the man who had droned on about quadratic equations and calculus, now living it up as if he had no care in the world. As the beat dropped, I felt a wave of confidence wash over me. I began to dance, mimicking some ridiculous moves I'd seen in music videos. Lucas laughed and joined in, twirling me around as we both lost ourselves in the rhythm. For a moment, everything else faded away. The crowd cheered us on, and I felt this weird sense of connection with my teacher. I always saw him as this uptight guy who never smiled, but here he was, completely carefree. I couldn't help but wonder how someone so jolly could turn back into that block of ice I saw every Monday morning. About an hour later, we were definitely beyond drunk by the time we stumbled off the table. Lucas, well, Mr. Smith, had his arm casually slung over my shoulders, like we'd been friends forever. It felt surreal. We were laughing, bumping into people, spilling drinks, and not caring. I don't even remember what we were talking about, just that it seemed hilarious. Every time I glanced at him, I kept thinking, how is this the same guy who gives me a death glare every time I forget my homework? The more we drank, the closer we got. Our bodies just naturally gravitated toward each other. I kept catching him smirking at me, and my stomach flipped every time. "I need some air," I shouted over the music. "Let's find somewhere quieter," Lucas said, nodding toward the back. As we talked, our hands brushed, sending a jolt of electricity through me. We ended up near the bathrooms, where it was quieter and darker, the lights casting a hazy glow. Suddenly, Lucas turned to me, his eyes intense. Before I could think, we were leaning in, and then our lips crashed together. It wasn't gentle, but messy, urgent, with the taste of alcohol on his breath. His hands gripped my waist, pulling me closer. My back hit the wall, but I didn't care. All I could think about was how right it felt. We stumbled into a bathroom stall, the door slamming shut behind us. The tiny space made everything more intense. We couldn't keep our hands off each other, lips never breaking apart. His hands were in my hair, pulling me closer while I explored his chest. We kissed like we were starving, like nothing else mattered. And for that moment, nothing else did. Just us. God, how did I even end up here? Flashback. A year ago. It was just another Monday, and I was already dreading the day. My old math teacher, Mr. Jenkins, had retired, and rumors were flying that his replacement was some strict, boring guy. Everyone in class was tense, waiting for the new teacher. I wasn't too worried. I'd always managed to scrape by with minimal effort, and math was just something to survive. I nevertheless had no plans of continuing with it after school. I sat near the back chatting with my friends about the weekend, barely paying attention. Then the door opened, and in walked Lucas Smith. The first thing I noticed was how young he was. Way younger than I expected. He couldn't have been more than late 20s, which was a big change from the older teachers we were used to. He was tall, broad-shouldered, with messy blonde hair and piercing blue eyes. The room practically sighed when he entered. But any thoughts I had about him being cool disappeared the moment he spoke. "All right, sit down and be quiet," he said firmly. "No introductions, no smile. I'm Mr. Smith, and I'll be teaching this class. Follow the rules, do the work, show up on time, or fail. Simple as that. The room went silent. Even my friends stopped talking. This guy meant business. I rolled my eyes. Another teacher who thought being strict would make us care about math. Great. For the first 10 minutes, he went over the syllabus, laying down the law. I zoned out quickly, staring out the window until I heard my name. Jayden Brown, are you paying attention? Mr. Smith's voice cut through the room. I blinked, caught off guard. Yeah, I mumbled. He didn't buy it. If you think you can pass this class by not paying attention, you're mistaken. Care to explain what I just said? My mind went blank. The syllabus? He raised an eyebrow. Wrong. I was explaining the homework. The class snickered, and I felt my face heat up. See me after class, he said, moving on without another word. I slumped in my seat, face burning. First day, and I had already managed to get on the teacher's bad side. A few weeks later. Over the next few weeks, Mr. Smith quickly became the most hated teacher in school. He wasn't just strict, he was ruthless. He called out every little mistake, gave extra homework for late assignments, and handed out detentions for missed classes. He didn't care if anyone thought he was unfair. Rules were rules, and that was it. Everyone hated him. Well, almost everyone. I wanted to join in with the complaints, but there was something about him that caught my attention. He carried himself with confidence and taught in a way that made me want to try harder. Unlike other teachers, he didn't let me get by with minimal effort, and that challenge sparked something in me. Of course, I acted like everyone else, rolling my eyes when he called on me and complaining about the workload, but deep down, I started looking forward to math class, which surprised even me. It didn't hurt that he was ridiculously attractive. I often found myself zoning out, not from boredom, but because I couldn't stop staring at him. His sharp features, the way his muscles flexed when he wrote on the board. One day after class, I stayed behind to ask about the homework, or so I told myself. Really, I just wanted an excuse to talk to him. You need help with something? He asked, looking up with those piercing blue eyes. Yeah, the problem on page 47, I mumbled, trying to keep cool. He came over, standing close as he leaned in to look at my textbook. The scent of his cologne made my heart race. As he explained the problem, I couldn't focus on his words. All I could think about was how close he was, how his arm brushed mine. That's when it hit me. I was really into him. From that moment on, I couldn't stop thinking about him. Flashback end. The next morning. My head was pounding hard as I woke up the next morning in what I think was a cheap motel. My tongue felt like sandpaper, and the fog in my brain was too much for me to be able to see anything for a while when I noticed him. Lucas, I said, half expecting him to disappear. He was sitting with his back to me, shoulders hunched, head buried in his hands. Head turned around, eyes wide with confusion and panic. Jayden? What the hell happened? Why are we here? Together? I blinked, trying to remember the night before. I'm not sure, I replied, my brain slowly catching up. Lucas ran a hand through his messy hair, looking like he was about to have a meltdown. Did something happen between us? I don't remember anything. Did we? I couldn't help myself. This was too ridiculous, so I grinned. Well, I'm not sure exactly what happened, but maybe something did. I leaned back on my elbows, watching his face go pale. What? No, I can't. We can't. His breathing quickened as he paced. This can't be happening. I'm your teacher, for God's sakes. I bit my lip to hold back laughter. I mean, we did end up in a motel together, didn't we? Who knows what could have happened after all that drinking? You were into it, too, from what I remember. He practically jumped out of the bed, pacing back and forth. No, this is wrong. I'm going to lose. Relax, I interrupted, finally dropping the act when I saw how freaked out he was. Lucas, nothing happened. Well, not like that anyway. He stopped, still skeptical. What do you mean nothing happened? I shrugged, trying to sort my thoughts. We kissed, made out a little maybe, but that's it. We didn't sleep together or anything. We just crashed here after we left the bar. He stared at me frozen before letting out a shaky breath. That's it? You're sure? Yeah, I nodded. Pretty sure. I was wasted too, but I definitely remember us kissing. Nothing more than that. Relief washed over him as he slumped into the chair next to the bed, head tilted back. Thank God, he muttered. I don't know what I thought. Hey, I said, trying to lighten the mood. We're both adults, right? It's not like we committed a crime or anything. He shot me a sharp look, his strict teacher persona coming back. That's not the point, Jayden. I'm your teacher. Whatever happened last night was a huge mistake. I winced at the word mistake, but stayed silent. He stood up, brushing off his clothes like he was trying to wipe away the whole situation. We can't let this happen again, and you can't tell anyone about this ever. I raised an eyebrow. You think I'm going to tell people I spent the night with my math teacher? Relax, Lucas, your secret's safe with me. He looked unconvinced but started gathering his things. I'm serious, Jayden. Not a word about this to anyone, and this can never happen again. And with that, he shot me one last look before heading for the door and left. I flopped back onto the bed, staring at the ceiling. This can never happen again. Sure, maybe not, but with how things were going, I wasn't so sure that that was what I wanted. Later that day, I couldn't stop thinking about what had happened that morning. After Lucas, Mr. Smith rushed out of the motel room, I spent the day replaying the night in my head. Waking up next to him was strange, and now back at school, I have expected things to change between us. Maybe not a lot, but something. I figured I'd see him in class, maybe catch his eye or get a nod, anything to acknowledge what had happened, but as the day went on, it became clear that it wasn't going to be that simple. When I got to math class, he was already at his desk, shuffling through papers like he hadn't just spent the night freaking out. I walked in, gave him a casual nod, and waited for him to look up, but he didn't. His eyes were glued to the assignments, completely ignoring me. All right, maybe he didn't see me. I sat in my usual spot and kept glancing at him, waiting for some kind of acknowledgement, but class started and he didn't look my way once. He launched into his strict lecture, calling on other students and writing equations on the board like everything was normal. I tried to focus, but I couldn't help sneaking glances. It felt like I'd become invisible overnight. I raised my hand a couple of times, even to the questions I didn't have answers for, but he chose everyone except me. By the end of class, I was frustrated. I hung back, hoping to catch him alone, but he grabbed his things and headed for the door without a glance. Confusion and something colder settled in. I felt like everything we'd shared didn't matter anymore. Why was he freezing me out? The more I thought about it, the more lost I felt. A few weeks later, I couldn't take it anymore. I had spent days, weeks trying to talk to him, but he shut me out every time. The way he'd been acting like nothing had happened between us, like I was just another student, was driving me insane. It wasn't that I expected him to suddenly be my best friend, but I at least thought we could have a normal conversation, acknowledge that we did something. Who was I kidding? I wanted him to talk to me, treat me different, better than everyone else. I wanted things to be something between us, anything, but instead, he treated me different in the worst way possible. At first, I thought he needed some time, but that didn't seem to have any effect on him either. I'd given him space, but I couldn't get him out of my head. I had to try again. So, after class, while everyone else packed up and headed for the door, I hung back. I watched Lucas gather his papers, straighten his desk, and look like the world's most serious teacher. But this time, I wasn't going to just walk away. I had a plan. I grabbed my bag and strolled up to his desk, trying to play it casual. Mr. Smith, can I ask you something? I said, keeping my tone light. I've got a few doubts. He looked up, his expression neutral but wary. Doubts? He asked, his voice careful. I nodded, fighting to keep the smirk off my face. Yeah, just a few things I've been thinking about, stuff I can't quite figure out. He sighed, running a hand through his hair like he was already regretting this. All right, Jayden, what is it? What don't you understand? I took a step closer, lowering my voice so no one could hear us. Not that there was anyone left in the room. Was the kiss really that bad? Lucas froze, his eyes going wide. I could see the color draining from his face. What? He whispered, his voice barely there. I grinned, feeling a little smug. I mean, you've been avoiding me like the plague, so I have to wonder, was it really that terrible? Come on, you can tell me. His face went red so fast, it was almost comical. He opened his mouth to say something, then closed it again, clearly struggling to find the right words. I was loving every second of it. I'm not discussing this with you, he finally stammered, his voice shaky and his eyes darting around the room like he was looking for an escape. Come on, Lucas, I teased, leaning in a little closer. Was it really that bad? You didn't seem to hate it at the time. His face was practically glowing red now, and I could see him gripping the edge of his desk like it was the only thing keeping him grounded. Before he could respond, though, the door creaked open behind me, and I heard footsteps. I straightened up immediately, my heart skipping a beat. It was the principal. I quickly excused myself, but didn't leave all the way through. Instead, I stood outside the door, eavesdropping. Mr. Smith, Principal Harris said, stepping into the room with his usual air of authority. What were you doing with that student? He had some doubts about the material, he said, his voice steady but tense. Doubts, huh? The principal said slowly, like he didn't quite believe it. Well, I hope you're not up to your old ways again, Mr. Smith. My stomach flipped at the tone in the principal's voice. There was something off about it, something weird. What do you mean by old ways? "Of course not, sir," he muttered, his voice barely there. "Good," he said, "because I won't tolerate any such issues here. Do you understand?" "I understand," was all Lucas said before the principal left, and I hid myself just in time. A few seconds later, I returned and peered into the classroom to see Lucas sitting at his desk, his head in his hands, looking defeated. I had never seen him look like that before. He looked broken, like the weight of whatever the principal had said was crushing him. I pulled back, biting my lip, my mind racing. Old ways? What did that mean? What had Lucas done in the past that made the principal say something like that? As I stood there, I felt a weird mix of emotions, curiosity, frustration, and a little bit of guilt. I had pushed him, teased him, and now, I had more questions than ever. But one thing was for sure. I wasn't going to stop until I figured out what was going on. About 2 weeks later. After that weird exchange between Lucas and Principal Harris, I couldn't stop thinking about what the principal had said. It echoed in my mind constantly, making me wonder what Lucas had done before coming here. So I decided to ask around. I started with the basics, casually dropping questions about Lucas whenever I was with some of the other students. At first, no one knew much, just that he was new this year, and that he'd come from another school a couple of towns over. That wasn't much to go on, but it was a start. One day after class, I overheard a group of kids talking about a party at a school nearby. I recognized the name. It was the school Lucas had transferred from. I figured I had nothing to lose, so I made up some excuse about knowing a few people there and tagged along. At the party, I started chatting with a couple of people from Lucas's old school. I didn't bring him up right away, but after a few drinks and casual conversation, I finally asked, "Hey, did you guys ever have a teacher named Lucas Smith?" The reaction was instant. One guy's face tightened and a girl next to him gave a little laugh, but it wasn't the kind of laugh that said anything good. "Yeah," the guy said, raising an eyebrow. "Why? He's your teacher now?" "Yeah," I nodded, trying to sound casual. "What was he like?" The girl rolled her eyes. "He was hot and super chill. A little too chill, if you know what I mean." "Super chill? Lucas? Really? Yet you don't seem particularly fond of him. Why?" I inquired. "Oh, 'cause of the whole scandal. It made quite a mess for all of us, especially him, even if it wasn't really his fault. Poor guy," she sighed. I didn't know what she meant, but was dead sure that this was exactly what I was looking for all along. After prying for a little while, I learned that one of the students in Lucas's old school pursued him incessantly. Despite his rejection, he kept on it, and one day they were caught on by the school authority. The kid claimed that they were both involved. This was not only against the rules but also illegal since the kid was still a minor. The case escalated and cost Lucas his job and almost a criminal record. However, since Lucas has had a good and clean history and people knew how sincere he was, no charges were pressed, which is when he transferred to my school. I felt my heart race. Involved with a student? That explained a lot. This is why he is so uptight here all the time, making sure that everyone hates him. God, he had been going through so much alone, and all I had done was make it difficult for him. But no more. He needs to know that he is not alone anymore. He'll never be alone anymore. 2 days later. After learning the truth about Lucas's past, I felt a mix of anger and sadness. I wanted to help him, to make him understand that it's okay. But every time I tried to talk to him at school, he was like a ghost. There, but never really there. Always avoiding me. It was driving me nuts. I couldn't keep waiting for him to come around, so I decided to take matters into my own hands. One evening, I found out that Lucas lived in an apartment complex not too far from the school. So, after school, I cornered him there, in the parking lot of his apartment complex. Not my brightest idea, but I had to do something. Just as I reached his car, I spotted Lucas. He was shocked to see me, to say the least. "What are you doing here?" he asked, his tone clipped. I stepped closer, determined. "I need to talk to you, Lucas." "I don't have time for this," he replied, trying to brush past me, but I stepped in front of him, blocking his path. "Please," I said, my voice firm yet pleading. "Just hear me out." He sighed, running a hand through his hair in frustration. "Jayden, I really don't want to. I know what happened at your old school," I interrupted, my heart pounding in my chest. "I know you're scared, but you don't have to be. I'm not going to hurt you. I like you. I genuinely care for you." His eyes widened, and for a brief moment, I saw vulnerability flash across his face. But then his walls went back up and he shook his head. "If you know, then you should understand. Stay away from me." "No," I said, desperation creeping into my voice. I can't stay away from you. I like you, Lucas. I care for you so much. I would never hurt you like that. I promise I would never let anyone hurt you like that ever again. At my words, I saw something shift in his expression. Tears glistened in his eyes as he struggled to maintain his composure. You don't understand, he said, his voice trembling. I do understand, I insisted, stepping closer. I know you're scared, and I can't take away the past, but I want to be here for you. Just let me in. Before I knew it, I stepped forward and pulled him into a hug. He tensed at first, but then he melted against me, letting out a shuddering breath. I could feel the weight of his emotions as he began to cry, and I held him tighter, whispering words of comfort. It's okay. Let it out. I'm here for you. I held Lucas as he cried, his body shaking against mine. I'd never seen him so vulnerable before. When he finally stopped, he pulled back and looked at me, his face still streaked with tears. I like you too, he whispered, his voice barely holding together. Hearing that made my heart swell. I smiled and leaned in, gently kissing the tears away from his eyes. We stared at each other, the air between us thick with emotion. Before I knew it, Lucas was sitting on the hood of a car, and I was standing between his legs, our faces inches apart. Our lips were close, almost touching. But then, he stopped me. I blinked, confused, as he cupped my face in his hand. If you really like me, prove it to me, he said softly, his thumb brushing my cheek. Prove it? How? I asked, my heart racing. Wait for me, he replied, his voice gentle but firm. In a few months, you'll officially pass out from school. I know you're already of age now, but when you graduate, when you've seen more of life, find me then. If you still feel the same, we'll figure it out. I stared at him, torn between wanting him now and understanding what he was saying. What if I don't want to wait? I whispered. Then I might confuse your feelings for mere infatuation, he replied, his voice steady but gentle. Tell me you like me. Tell me you really care for me. Show me I can trust you by waiting for me. At that moment, I moved in close, right up to Lucas, and for a second, he looked shocked. His eyes widened like he didn't know what I was about to do, but instead of kissing him like he might have expected, I just smiled softly and leaned in, pressing a gentle kiss to his forehead. When I pulled back, his eyes softened. I'll find you soon, I promised, stepping away but keeping my gaze on him. Lucas didn't say anything, just watched me with a mix of emotions in his eyes. Then I turned and walked away with nothing but hope in my heart. I knew it wouldn't be easy, but I was willing to wait for him. I knew he liked me, and he knew I liked him, but it wasn't enough. He needed to know I wouldn't give up on him, and deep down, I knew that I wouldn't give up on him. Not now, not ever. A few months later. A few months had passed since the day Lucas confessed. I kept my word to him and an appropriate distance from him, despite how much it killed me to see him every day and not be close to him. It took tons of effort, but I had finally graduated high school and was now a college student. But even as my life moved forward, one thing never changed, my feelings for him. I kept my promise, and now it was time to find him again. Standing outside his apartment holding a massive bouquet of flowers, I felt my heart race. What if he changed his mind? What if he didn't feel the same way anymore? I shook off the doubts. I wasn't going to back down now. I had waited for this moment. Just as I was about to knock on his door, it opened, and there he was, Lucas. He looked as surprised as I felt, freezing in place when he saw me standing there with the flowers. For a moment, neither of us spoke. We just stared at each other, the world around us fading away. I came, I said, my voice soft but steady. I came for you, baby. His eyes welled up with tears, and before I could say anything else, he ran toward me, wrapping his arms around me in the tightest hug I'd ever felt. I hugged him back, feeling the warmth of his body, the familiar scent of him. It was like no time had passed at all, like we were right where we were meant to be. He pulled back just enough to look at me, his eyes shining with emotion. Am I too late? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper, suddenly afraid that maybe I'd waited too long. Lucas shook his head, tears slipping down his cheeks. No, he whispered, smiling through the tears. You're right on time. Relief washed over me, and I couldn't help but smile back. It felt like the weight I'd been carrying for months had finally lifted. This was real. We were here together, and nothing else mattered. I took a deep breath and grinned at him. So, can I kiss you now? I asked, teasing him just a little. Instead of answering, Lucas blushed, and before I could even react, he leaned in and kissed me. It was soft at first, his lips tentative against mine, but it quickly deepened, full of all the emotions we'd both been holding back. It was everything I'd imagined and more, the kind of kiss that made the world disappear. I dropped the bouquet of flowers without even thinking, wrapping my arms around him as I kissed him back. It was like we were the only two people in the universe, and nothing else mattered except this moment. When we finally pulled apart, both of us were breathing hard, our foreheads resting against each other. "You have no idea how long I've wanted to do that," I whispered, still grinning like an idiot. Lucas laughed softly, his cheeks still flushed. "Me too," he admitted, his voice full of warmth. "I didn't think you'd actually come back for me." I looked at him, my heart swelling with affection. "Where else would I have gone?" I said, brushing a stray tear from his cheek. He smiled, a full smile at me, and in that moment I knew he was mine, with all his heart, fears, scars, and love. Conclusion. A few years later, Lucas and I were standing together in our new home, married, finally. It felt surreal, like everything we'd gone through had led us here. The waiting, the challenges, the ups and downs, it was all worth it. Now there was no more hiding, no more secrets, just us, ready to face whatever life threw our way. I looked at him, my husband, and smiled. We'd gone through so much to be together, but it only made us stronger. Our future was bright, filled with love, trust, and the promise of a lifetime ahead. As I held his hand, I knew we were exactly where we meant to be, happy and in love. The end. Do you believe that love knows no age? Thanks for watching. Consider subscribing to become part of our Rainbow Force, and stay wholesome.